It is 4:21 on Tuesday, April 22nd, 2025, and we'll call this special City Commission Budget Work Session meeting to order. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mayor Gary.
Here.
Commissioner Bauer. Commissioner Buspis Rath.
Here.
Commissioner Habusta.
Here.
Commissioner Marble.
Here.
Commissioner Rubenstein.
Here.
Commissioner Talentino.
Here. Commissioner Bauer did indicate that he wouldn't be able to make it this evening, so we'd need a motion to excuse.
I'll make the motion to excuse Commissioner Bauer.
Support.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? He is excused. If everybody could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So, mayor comments and general announcements. I have none this evening, so. Item B, special orders of business. City Manager Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the title of the meeting indicates, we are here for our budget meeting. I should turn on my microphone here. Tonight, we have the manager's recommended budget for you all to review. Kind of the process is the same as we've done it in the years prior. We'll kind of go through it budget by budget, line by line. If the commission has any questions or anything they'd like to discuss, we'd be more than happy to entertain that. We are prepared, if there's a hit or a wish, we can accommodate those as well. Just to kind of wrap up the process, the budgeting process started back in the fall with the CIP development. That went through till January when we started the operating budget. All the staff members have spent time putting in their, all their line items. We reviewed it. We took some things out. We made it fit the revenues that we have, and now it is here for your review and potential approval. Before we start, I want to thank the staff. The staff spent a lot of time inputting all of their budgets and figuring out all their costs. There were some things that we had to cut out, and they were very responsive in making those cuts and adjustments. Robin, Callie, and Kristen put a lot of time into this. They were the ones that kind of kept us going too, as I was out of town for some family stuff. So big thank you to the three of them for getting this through. Like I said, if there's any questions or anything, we'd be happy to entertain them, or if there's hit and wish, we can talk about those too. So we do have kind of on a placeholder the meeting for next Monday for budget reconciliation, if that's necessary. We haven't had it in the last few years, but it's there just in case. Once this is complete, the first reading of the budget will go to the first meeting in May, second meeting in May, what was it? First meeting in May, and then final consideration of it in the second meeting in May or the first meeting in June. So we're kind of nearing the end of this process here, and without further ado, we'll just kind of jump into it. So we've got your budget packets here. We'll just kind of go budget by budget. We've got them broken out by kind of the things that we spend the most time on, starting off with the general fund, going into utilities and so on and so forth. So without anything else, we'll kind of get into the general fund. So kind of going on to page 3 of your budget book, the first section, the 101-000s. Those are all of the anticipated revenue sources coming in for the general fund for the next fiscal year. We do take a conservative approach with them. It's kind of best to under budget them and have them come over versus overestimate and have them come under. So there is a conservative approach with the revenues. All in all, the budgets are the anticipated revenues for fiscal year 25-26. About $16,159,000. For the most part, a lot of them are kind of static moving forward from one year to the next year. I guess just one thing to kind of point out, the first line item, tax revenue, 5.6 million, revenue sharing, constitutional and statutory is 1.4 and 500,000, and then ambulance service at 1.725. So these are kind of the big three, or technically four. I always put revenue sharing together, but these are the three big revenue sources that we have in the budget. Together, they're about $9.3 million. So these three sources are kind of the bulk of the revenues that come into the fund balance or to the general fund. Just kind of going down the lines a little bit, just some high points here. Tax revenues expected to increase a little bit. That's based off of Prop A and Headley and the inflation rate. Everything else is kind of static. As kind of mentioned, we lost a little bit of marijuana revenue there from the permits. A couple places have closed out. Revenue sharing, the constitutional and statutory, those are kind of coming in static. Not sure how those are going to come out with the state budget process there. Just kind of moving down, again, most things are just carryovers from one year to the next. We don't anticipate a lot of movement in the revenues coming in for any particular general fund operation. Yeah. So I guess, does anything jump out, or any questions on the revenues for the general fund? Yeah, sorry.
Oh, no, thank you. Just one quick comment. I think one of the things that we need to be aware of is just our user fees. And I know we're hesitant to raise user fees, but as we look at things like the ball fields, which are taking in $2,600 in revenue according to this, but, you know, costs are significantly higher. I think $7,000 is what we'll see later on. I think we have to remember with inflation and other things that rates are going up, and our user fees, well, we definitely want to keep those low for the users. Many times the user fees are absorbed by people outside the city limits as well, users who are within the townships, and so I think, you know, our city users need to, I think our users need to be aware that our costs are rising as well, and so we need to appropriately, you know, adjust those when the time comes. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or any comments on the revenues overall for the general fund? All right. We will get down into the expense side of things. So starting off with 101, that is the city commission's budget. Again, for the most part, a lot of the expenses that you're going to see are pretty static. There's not a lot of change one way or another. For the most part, kind of going into the budget, our goal was to maintain the services and the funding levels that we have, essentially providing the services that we currently provide. I think we achieved that with this budget, maintaining the services that we currently have. There's nothing drastic in any kind of expense line or anything like that. So, first one, 101, is the salaries for the wages. Goes down into the related personnel costs, dues and subscriptions, the MML, travel and training for the conferences, and that's really kind of it for that budget. One of the smaller ones, but the most important one. No, nothing?
We got
Okay.
it.
Tried.
You tried.
Okay.
The actual should be a little bit lower than 32.1 though, because a few of us missed meetings.
Yes, but we budget for full attendance. So if it does come down during the fiscal year, then it'll come down, but
I mean, the yellow column. Projected.
oh. Yeah,
But like you said, it's little.
yeah. All right. Going into the commission, going into the city manager's budget. This one's pretty much static going forward. We do anticipate wage increases for all the staff based on collective bargaining agreements, which are pretty consistent right now in terms of the wage increases, as well as a follow-up wage increase equal to that for the non-reps and the department heads as well. So the increase in wages reflect proposed wage increases that'll be authorized by the commission at a later time, but we do plan for those wage increases. I guess just one quick comment that kind of came out of some conversations last year. The salaries line item for my budget, the city manager one, that's not just my salary. There was some comments made outside of the commission last year that was what I got paid. That is the salaries for myself and then Bryn, the administrative assistant. So just to clarify, that's not just my wages. Again, going down the line, for the most part, everything stays pretty static. We got postage in there, that does cover some of the city hall postage, that just falls into my budget. Travel and training stays pretty static. So for the most part, no major changes to the city manager budget. Any questions there? All right. Going down to the next section, 101, 173, these are the appropriations that we give to different operations. The first two ones are the pass-through, or the first one is the pass-through for Dial Ride. That is the federal transportation funding that goes to fund their operations. This year, we have proposed another appropriation Dial Ride for about $90,000. There is one thing that I need to adjust in here that we're gonna do kind of right now, and then we'll follow up when we approve the budget. EDC appropriation should be at $35,000. We'll bump that one back up there. That covers some of the costs for the consolidation efforts that they've been working on, as well as a DDA appropriation of about $136,900. New line item that we put in this one, as the commission is aware, our general fund balance has kind of got a little bit low per the policy. So to kind of show you the contributions that we're making into the fund balance, this line item was included in here. It's kind of a reference point for what we anticipate putting into the fund balance to kind of get us back up to snuff. And there's a chart near the end of the general fund budget that kind of shows you where we're anticipating going, so. Any questions there?
Just a comment. I just think that's a great corrective action there in restoring that fund balance, so thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome, but we don't have a choice. But you're welcome anyways.
Is that based on a certain percentage that we committed to in the plan?
Not necessarily. I mean, it's based on where we think we'll fall at this year, in addition to kind of what we could set aside for next year while funding the services and the certain capital requests. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a percentage of anything. It's just the first step in getting us back to where we need to be.
Go through the fund balance ratio that's after this.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. All right, skipping out of that area, going down to 101, 201, that is the finance department. No major changes here. There is one increase within payroll other, and that is due to an anticipated retirement within the finance department, so that's the payouts there. Not pointing any fingers at anybody, but this is Kristen's last budget meeting with you all, so, yeah. So we're anticipating the payouts from, the retirement, so that's the increase in there, so. Everything else for the most part, again, is all the same. We have our auditing fees in there. There's some travel and training that's required for their continuing education credits. For the most part, a lot of it's status quo moving forward. Any questions there? All right, moving down to 101, 215 is the city clerk's department. Again, salaries are there for the staff members within the clerk's office, anticipated raises based on one CBA as well as a department head level position. Everything going down flows in with the fringe benefit calculations based on salaries. Again, static going across, supplies, dues, subscriptions, contracted services. No major increase to expenses in those areas.
I know I'm lagging a little bit here, but why did audit fees double? Is that based on our bid?
Based on our bid, but we had a low year this current year because they started their field work early. So if you looked last year, it was a really expensive year. It was the timing. So it's just based on the bid. They had a very incremental increase year to year. But if you look at the first column showing the 23-24 year in there,
Yeah, that,
it's high. It's really high. By like, it was about $6,000 or $7,000 was that bill that was really for services rendered in June 2024 for this, for
so is our
fiscal
cost annually actually 33, or is it just a split
30.
between the?
33.
Okay. All right, getting out of the clerk's budget, going down to 101,257. That's the assessor's department. We budgeted that one to be status quo for the time being. Again, no major increases, no major cost adjustments. Outside of an increase, again, for payroll other, for an anticipated retirement. So everything else going across the board is pretty much the same. Contracted services, I believe a lot of that is the MTT work that we typically do. We do budget kind of higher for that. That way it's there if we need it. We don't have a lot of anticipated cases, but there could be a handful of small ones that come up that require us to use our consultant to handle those assessment challenges.
And that's the assessing side, but not the legal.
Correct, yes,
Side is charged to the legal department.
correct.
So with the assessor's office, the wages there are reflective of,
Status quo.
okay.
And if it
regardless
changes,
of what happens, okay.
yeah, if it changes, it changes, but right now it's just kind of status quo, because we don't know what we don't
What
know
that
at this
cost might
point, yeah. So. 101,262 is the election budget. Little bit of money put in here, not necessarily for this calendar year, but for anticipated elections within calendar year 2026. Or we could have in August as well, that's right. That's right. Right. Yeah. That's right. All righty, any questions there? All right, we'll move on to 265. 265 is the city hall budget. At one point, we did have a staff member that was helping us out with some cleaning of the facilities. Our longtime contractor had some time off that she took, so we did hire a part-timer to help us with that. That's why there are some part-time seasonal wages, but then they drop off. Again, for the most part, the budget's pretty static. There's some equipment repair and maintenance in there for things that come up. City Hall's older building, some of the systems are kind of not functioning the best, and we do have breaks throughout the year, so a little bit of money set aside just in case anything comes up there, so. Any questions there? 8, I gotta figure this out. All righty, moving down to 101. Excuse me, moving down to 101,266, that is our attorney fund. We have 2 line items in here. The first one, legal fees, contracted services, that is for our general counsel and our labor counsel with McGraw-Morris. And then the legal fee, or the tax tribunal appeal services fees are the attorney that we use with Foster Swift if there is a challenge within the state tax tribunal that requires us to go through that process. So we budget $10,000 in there. Again, we don't anticipate any big challenges coming in, but should we need them, we want to have some money set aside just in case we do need them. So legal fees moving into next year is budgeted for about $70,000, and that's been typically covering us so far. But if there's a bigger challenge or something does come up, that budget may need to be adjusted, but we don't anticipate anything coming up at this point, so. Any questions about attorneys or anything? Okay. 271, that is fringe benefits, just in general. And I guess, Chris, you might remind me what 271 is?
It's only for the retirees' life insurance. It has to be separated from all the other active employees, and we do carry that. And if there's a potential change in governmental accounting that will require us to make changing that someday to, record it as a long-term liability, but we've staved them off so far, so hopefully it won't come up in the near future. That's why we wanna keep it separate though, so we always have it.
Yep. Any questions there? All right, 101-301 is the police department. 101-301 is the police department. Wages, increase in wages reflect the CBAs that have been agreed to. No major staffing changes there. Everything else kind of falls in from the salary line items. We do have some grant funding sources in there for some overtime work regarding to things like snowmobile enforcement, drug impaired grants, pedestrian bicycle safety, things of that nature. Again, for the most part, the line items going down into the supplies, gas and uniforms, all that stuff stays pretty static moving forward. No major increases within the police department as anticipated. Any questions on the police department, general one, operating? Next couple of budgets are still within the police department, they're just called out separately. 101-302 is our participation in Trident. That's our drug task force that we participate in. That's a standalone officer that's within that budget. So it's not a major thing in terms of expenses, but it is kind of called out on the side because it's a special operations. So everything with that is pretty much static moving across as well. And the increase in the salaries is due to the CBA increases as the officer is one of our officers and part of the patrol union. Any questions there? 101-306 is our police auxiliary department. Again, budget dollar amounts are pretty consistent from year to year. The dollar amount for this one is kind of used for the special events and any services that we do call in auxiliary for. Auxiliary has a handful of different officers that we kind of call them based on availability to staff certain events and assist the police department with bigger events. So that one's pretty much static across the board. Any questions on that one? All right. Moving down to 101-336 is the fire department. Again, this is the fire department as an operation is broken into two budgets. There's the fire department and the ambulance side of the budget. Ambulance is typically our younger staff members. The older ones are charged to the fire department. So this doesn't reflect the overall budget, but this is just the operation on the fire side. Moving across, we had to estimate the wage increases. We don't have a concrete CBA with that union yet. We're still working on that. For the most part, everything is about static, kind of going down. Really no major increases. We've got equipment repair kind of budgeted for a high dollar amount just in case anything happens with any of our vehicles in our fleet. Everything for the most part is pretty static. Any questions about the fire department?
Projected column of the equipment repair maintenance might be a little high based on the decision last night.
Yeah, and we'll adjust those things accordingly, but. All right, 101-441, DPW, this one says operating, will you remind me what 441 is?
DPW, general services.
General service for DPW,
So compost.
that's right.
alleys, sidewalks, compost, putting up barricades for our events.
General services provided by DPW, so. Again, for the most part, everything's kind of static from one year to the next year. Slight increase in the wages based on the CBAs that were approved, followed by the fringe benefits, which all plays into the salaries. No major increases from one year to the next year. Just continuing to provide the services that we have there, that we currently offer. Yeah, any questions on that one?
Supplies jump from $5,000 to $25,000.
Supplies.
I believe that includes Christmas decorations,
New ones?
replacement of old.
Are they still up? Sorry. Is that a bad joke?
Too soon.
Okay.
All right, any questions there? Any other questions? All right, moving down to 101-447. That is our engineering department. Again, wages there, no major increases. Staffing levels are consistent with the years prior. Wage increases based on anticipated wage increases across the board. For the most part, everything is the same from year over. A little bit less contracted services anticipated for next year based on just projects and workload. Some of that stuff is going to be covered within the existing projects, funding sources that we have there. A little bit of travel and training just to maintain the CECs that the staff has to do. But otherwise, no major increases there. All right. 101-448 is the street lights operating expenses. And that's the actual electricity for the street lights, right?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. So a little bit of an increase just based on typical rate increases for the electric utility. Moving down from that one to 101-567 is our cemetery fund. We have our portions of our full-time staff budgeted within this one. We have part-time seasonal wages budgeted to help out with the summertime. For the most part, kind of the same going across the board from year to year. I know there's been some concerns expressed regarding the maintenance of the cemetery. We are trying to get some part-time seasonals in there to kind of help out and lend an extra hand so that we can kind of keep up on that stuff. But for the most part, everything is status quo moving forward. Any questions on the cemetery fund? All right, going down to 592 is Harvey Marina. Oh, excuse me. Harvey Marina, that is the marina over on the east side. There is no staff dedicated to that one. Some of the staff from the Parks Department or the other marina goes there and does some work. So for the most part, it's just some internal services, electricity and sanitation services. So nothing major there. No major increases. 101-593 is the Carbide Dock Fund. This has the expenses and some of the contractual services that we approved last night for operation of the dock. The private security services there, we approved that contract last night. We're anticipating about $35,000, which is up from last year because the number of cruise ship landings were down last year, and they're going right back up to where they were 2 years ago. So there's going to be an increase in some of those expenses. but also there's an increase in the fees or the revenue sources for the carbide dock as well. And this will be the first year that all of the cruise ships will actually be using the carbide dock when they come into town too, so a little bit less expense on some of the contractual services. Any questions on that one?
So the fact that all those ships are docking there and we're coordinating it now doesn't impact our wages or any other type of contractual relationships?
So Kyler is our harbor master, and his full funding source is in
Marina?
the other marina, yes. We don't have that one broken out. We can, we don't, it's all general fund anyway, so we just have him billed totally to the marina.
And that decrease in contracted services, that's a direct result of not having to use, another dock. That's all. on
Correct.
our Carbide dock. Perfect, thank you.
Correct. Yep. Alrighty, moving down to 595, that is our airport budget. That covers the one part-time airport manager that we have on staff up there. The budget doesn't have major increases, and it includes the contract services for the FBO, as well as some maintenance activities up there. There's some there's some travel funds for any kind of training that's required up there. But for the most part, it's pretty status quo moving across the board. Any questions on the airport? All right, 101,597, that's the Kent Marina, that's where Kyler is billed to, like we just discussed. Going down their budget, again, not a lot of change from year to year for the most part. Is providing the full-time person the necessary part-time seasonal wages to operate the marina. We do have a gas expense in here, gas, oil, and grease. That's the expense on our side to purchase the fuel that's at the fuel bays down at the marina. Obviously, there's an offsetting revenue source for that one. Electricity, gas, heat, pretty much status quo going across the board, as well as some building maintenance within there, so. Any questions on the Kent Marina? No, all right, moving on to 101,651 is the ambulance portion of the fire department. Again, this is the portion, a lot of it's the younger staff members that are rolling on the ambulance. They're segregated out based on cost centers. Increases to salaries are based on an estimated potential increase. CBA is not finalized with that one. We'll wrap that one up here pretty soon. For the most part, everything is status quo, moving down the line items. No major increases throughout that.
In the ambulance, there was a request in the ambulance for 3 new positions, which might have been funded by a grant. So those were cut, if you notice, the department level, and then it went down to the manager and recommended, but those might be added back if we received the grant award.
That was no, never mind.
Health insurance went up 40%?
That varies a lot with new hires. So when there's a vacant position or a new hire, it can really swing. Cost for a family is around over $20,000, and cost for a single is around $5,000. But then an opt-out is around, or single might be $8,000, $5,000 is opt-out. So it varies a lot based on the person. So if there's new hires, we might budget for them to be a family, to be conservative.
So the 96.1 is based on the staffing we have today?
Yes, and we anticipate possibly 3 retirements in the next fiscal year as well. I guess those retirements would be in the fire department, they wouldn't be in the ambulance budget. Yeah. Any questions about the ambulance? That's really loud. All right, moving on to 101701 is our community development budget. Community development maintains the staffing levels that we have right now. Community development director, administrative assistant, code enforcement, as well as building codes. No major changes going across the board. Again, wage increases are anticipated based on wage adjustments that would be recommended at a later time. For the most part, everything's kind of status quo moving forward from one year to the next year. No major changes there. Any questions? All right, 702 is our zoning budget. It's just small related zoning activities that Mr. Freeman may conduct from time to time. Nothing major there. The next set of budgets been moved to a different area. Going down to 101775 is on Osborne Campground. This one has our manager of that particular facility that also puts the hands in some other operations throughout the organization. For the most part, it's status quo. There's not a lot of major changes to the expense side of this operation. We've got some part-time seasonal wages in there that we typically hire out and stay with us throughout the summer. At one point, we were able to lower those by facilitating a camp host to kind of sit in the front. They actually helped us reduce our costs by not necessarily needing all the extra part-time work, and that's worked out pretty well so far. But for the most part, kind of status quo going across the board, no major increases in expenditures. Any questions on any questions? All right, going down to 776 is our parks maintenance budget. This is the summertime activities for our summertime activities for our parks department. Again, wage increases are based on union contractual or the union CBAs that have been approved. Find my line item. No real major increases expected for the next fiscal year. Kind of holds the program kind of status quo. Does include some of the work for the community gardens that we offer. Equipment rental, pays for some of the equipment that they use. So nothing major. Any questions there? All right, moving into 101777 is the Polar budget, which is the other portion of the funding mechanism for our Parks Rec staff. Again, increases in wages are based on the union CBAs. For the most part, everything is kind of status quo, moving from one year to the next year. There's some increases based into the is based on some of the gas and electricity, a little bit of increases there, nothing major. But for the most part, it's pretty static going across the board from one year to the next year as well. And I guess just as a side note, the hood should be completed this week as well. So that's the thing, but that'll be done. We finally got the plans back. The contractors are just finishing up. I think they had to make some brackets up there, but that one should be wrapped up, so. All right, any questions on the Polar? All right, moving down to our Sioux Seal recreational budget. That's the ski and sled hill up there. A lot of these expenditures are obviously dependent on the weather. We had a decent year this year, so there were some higher expenses compared to last year, where we really didn't have much of a season and the expenses were down. So we're anticipating another good year next year. Hopefully not as good as this year, but we're going to have anticipating a good winter year next year. So we're kind of funding them back as what we have in the prior winters. No major changes in terms of anything operating wise. Everything's kind of moving forward from one year to year. One year to the next year, kind of status quo, so. Any questions on that one? All right, moving down to 101780, that's our smaller beautification budget. That one pays for some of the work around the cleanup day. What? Oh, flower bins, I'm sorry, yeah. I was thinking it was the other one, but this one pays for some of the work with the flower bins that DPW takes care of. No major increases there. 101804 is our historic homes. Part-time seasonal wages are for the docents that provide the tours and the visits to the area. We do have a little bit of a decrease, a slight decrease based on the hours that we'll have kind of available for the summertime. For the most part, it's pretty status quo moving across the board. All right, moving into 902, those are kind of the line items for the specific capital projects that we have budgeted. That's being funded out of the general fund into the capital improvement program, so nothing major on that one that we won't cover probably in the CIP here as we move forward. So at the end of the day, general fund is balanced, proposed to be balanced. Again, we're making contributions into building back up the fund reserve. We're funding the necessary services that we have traditionally provided. There's no major loss in services from one year to the next year. So it should be pretty good. So is there any questions in general about the general fund?
So on the 902 line item, is that where the fire truck will be, or is that just equipment? I see there was $1 million request, I'm assuming that was.
That shows the request of the fire truck, but it was moved to stock and equipment.
Yeah.
So if we are, where are we getting the extra 300,000 or whatever it is to fund the difference if we are putting 240,000 into the general fund?
So
Where are we gonna pull that money?
kind of what we talked about last night is if there's an opportunity to fund it with the cash, if we can go through the budget and find that much in cash to make up that difference, we will. But more than likely, it'll be a loan of some sort to kind of bridge that gap.
So we're gonna need a wish or something on this?
Kind of what?
Do we need a wish or something? Cause we're gonna have a,
No, I think, go ahead, Kristen.
I entered a wish for you,
you did?
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
With $500,000 loan and $300,000 from the general fund and $300,000 from gaming.
Yeah. Okay. All right, going on to page 19. It's kind of the, I'm sorry.
One note, Brian, you might want to mention about year two being a negative. Did you want to
Oh,
mention that?
yeah, I mean, so this current fiscal year that we're proposing is a balanced budget. Fiscal year, the second year within the budget is at a negative. I mean, it's kind of a, I'd say it's kind of a placeholder just to kind of indicate that there could be some changes that we'll have to look at kind of moving forward into next year. We didn't typically focus on year two. We just kind of carried them over from one year to next year, but I guess just as something that we're going to be stacked up against or something we'll have to work through next year is this kind of a negative about 300,000, but that doesn't play into the budget that we had approved tonight. That's just a future thing, but it's just something to be cognizant about.
So when this year is projected, then that reflects the contribution we did on Meridian and the contribution to the Carbide, among other things?
In the fund balance?
Yeah, the negative
Oh.
1.2 million.
Yes. Yes. All right, so if we want to go to page 19, I'm just going to turn it over to Kristen. She can kind of walk you through the fund balance ratio sheet that we have.
So this is based on our fund balance policy, which is from 2013, if memory serves. So it might be a time to take a look at that in the next couple of years. Our required amount is, for the unreserved fund balance ratio, is 15 to 20%. And in the yellow column, we show, based on this tough year, we're down to 13%. If you take a look at the first column of numbers, we were at 36% or so, 35.93. And then in the orange column, it shows we're going down a little bit further. And it's a little deceptive because we're gonna get it back, but it's showing based on the budget. So that, in that column, we have the committed fund balance of $1,092,000. That's committed because that's obligations, which most of it is based on the liability for compensated absences, accrued sick leave and vacation leave for active employees. The 954.5, I'm looking in that orange column, that is the unassigned fund balance. So that's great. That's how much we have that can be dedicated toward whatever comes up. And then the total unrestricted fund balance is $2,046,700, and that's the number at the bottom of the orange column on the previous page. So when you do the math there, that's 12.77. The calculation right below that is, and this is left over from something Spencer wanted. He wanted to show it without the compensated absences. So if you felt like the compensated absences wasn't really fair, I mean, we're not going to close up shop and pay everybody their vacation pay tomorrow. So that being considered, if that was excluded, we'd be down to 10.39%. Below that in purple, we've shown a few examples that if we were at 25%, what would our fund balance be? It would be $4,007,000. So with the current projected of $2,046,000, the shortfall to get to 25% is almost $2 million. That's just for your awareness. I had that in before we had to use this bottom part. Right below that, I said, okay, well, what is it at 15%? It would be $2,404,200. And since we're showing $2,046,000 at the top, it shows that we need to get another $357,500 to get it to 15%. Now, in your policy, for fund balance policy, once you get below 15%, you have 3 years to replenish that. So in the budget year being presented, we've shown contributing $294,008 back into it. You're getting most of the way there in 1 year. So that's a positive. We didn't take the full 3 years. We didn't even, wouldn't even need 2 based on this. But we also show that the next year, because of expenditures being increasing more rapidly than revenue, we show that it's going to need another $241,500 in that year. That's that's why we have the negative in year 2. So it's kind of a look ahead. It's really important for your decision makers to see what's going to happen in the next year. This is all budget, so we're all just projecting and doing our best to estimate ahead. Are there any questions on the fund balance?
I think you answered one of them, because I knew there were some self-imposed guidelines if we drop below those. So it's just the one thing, we have 3 years to replenish, is that what the
3 years to replenish
question?
based on the current, bless you, based on the current shortfall. If the shortfall, I'm going based on memory here, so if the shortfall was a greater, if it reduced down to a lower percentage, I think there would be maybe more strict requirements. I can't remember, or it might, if, they might offer us 5 years, I can't remember exactly, but there was different measures of time to repay it based on how bad it is.
So in the policy, it says the city will reduce recurring expenditures to eliminate any structural deficit. City will increase revenues or pursue other funding sources or some combination of the two. Since we're violating our own city policy, do we have some type of we'd need to take some type of an action, I would think, at a meeting?
If you read down further, it says about how to remediate. When you do fall below, what to do in response.
So that was how we replenished the deficiencies, or something else there?
Yep. And that, as far as I read, it was, we fall within the requirement to repay it in 3 years. Within 3 years.
Okay. By taking one of those 3 actions, so
Yeah, yep.
which one are we taking?
We are, I mean,
We'll have a structural deficit.
it was a
if
one,
we're-
it was a one time only. It wasn't really a structural deficit because it wasn't operating, being overspending. It was a capital. So it's not really a continued issue.
Okay.
So I think some of the wording there is maybe applicable to a structural deficit where it was operating was higher expenditures than your revenue.
Yeah. I mean, essentially what we're doing is we're taking money that would be, if the fund balance was where it was like last year, we're essentially taking funds that would be used for like a capital project or something else and putting it back into the fund balance. We didn't have a structural deficit like Kristen said. So we're just essentially using the cash that we can come up with to start replenishing it back.
And we're funding capital through other means. We have the reserves we're using. We're having stock and equipment buy its own equipment this year. We're not really funding that, a deficit in stock and equipment. I mean,
Yeah, we're on a workout plan though, so it's kind of scares me,
Yeah.
yep.
so. Okay.
All right, any questions? All right. Moving on to the next couple of pages here is what we have as the capital projects and equipment purchases for the next fiscal year. In the document, you can see what people have requested versus what has been recommended to be funded. The things in the year one manager recommended have been built into the operating and capital budgets, or into the operating budget. I guess the one thing that's kind of got to be updated, we kind of already did it, was the number 13, the fire pumper, just based on the action that we took last night. So you can kind of go down, see the different equipment purchases that we have, or projects that we're working on, as well as the funding source in the next column, and the dollar amount that we approved for purchase.
It's informal, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Can you just talk through number 9? There's nothing requested, but then there was a recommendation.
This is loader refurbish. You guys want to take that one?
It wasn't put in as part of the CIP process. It came through as a request during the departmental budget meeting. And so we added it in during the departmental budget meeting and recommended it in the manager's recommended line item.
Thank you.
All in all, I guess between all the funds and the projects and everything, we're looking at about 2.4 million in capital expenses. The request came in at about 7.9, but we did have to make some cuts to some of the projects, unfortunately.
I did ask the city manager about number 41, the pump motor rehabilitation, and was told that from the time of the request to the time of the recommendation, the price had increased on that project. Is that correct?
That's correct. Right, Kirk? The pumper one went up?
There was also the change, if you look at the line, the row right below it, we had two items that were both pumps, and one of them was funded by a grant. So we moved them together because they're not going to be funded by the grant.
Does anybody have any other questions on any of the purchases or funding sources or anything?
Would you like to look at the hit and wish about the fire truck, or were there any other questions about that? Or just touch back at that at the end when we review the hit and wish?
We'll just make those changes. We'll just make those changes.
We have to vote on them. Or do we have to
No.
do that at the next meeting? Right?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. We can just make those adjustments and then they'll be just part of the budget. We'll approve them when we approve the budget.
So I take it we're not getting any money from the, that Ashman Bay thing, or, I can't remember what that grant source was.
Oh, that big one?
Yeah.
Ashland Bay? No. I think that was one of the grants that got axed at the federal level, for the Ashland Bay one, correct?
The Great Lakes Coastal, whatever they are, is that what that is?
Yes, and. Yeah.
Okay.
That particular program, I believe, was one of the ones that was kind of in the spotlight at the federal level based on some of the criteria that the grant was trying to achieve. So that program got defunded.
Gives you something to talk about at the League of Women Voters.
In a very non-political, very
Yeah.
factual sense.
Correct.
Yes. Just as I did just now.
Some of the projects with grant funding, you may see come back mid-year. If we are successful in the grant award, we'll bring it back and look for the funding then. So if you notice at the bottom, it shows the funding sources, some by funding source. And the second one after general fund is grant. There was $3.8 million looking for grant money, and then that shows as 0 in the column where we're looking at now, so. He'll be back, some of them, a few of them.
Any other questions on capital? All right, we're gonna transition. Does anybody need to use the water or sewer fund operations? Make a contribution to Kirk O'Brien?
Yeah. Up to you.
Yeah, thank you, Wes. It's gonna reflect positively in your budget request next year. All right, so getting,
Speaking of sewer and water, what's the next?
Yeah, hence my joke. All right, so sewer and water, the enterprise fund. So just to kind of reiterate, sewer and water are enterprise funds. Essentially, they're supposed to be somewhat self-sustainable to where their expenses should be covered by their revenues. So they're standalone, they're not supported by general fund. Money from the sewer and the water rates can't be used into the general fund. It's completely segregated between the two. So we've talked a lot about sewer and water funds in the last couple of years based on some of the anticipated projects and the rounds of borrowing that we've approved. So we'll kind of come back to the line items if we want to, but I'm just gonna kind of jump right to the back and kind of get to the main point and just kind of show you where the budget is at and how it's going to impact the rates. So if we want to go back in the line items, that's great, we can do that. But just kind of cut to the chase, here's what is going to be proposed and here's what's going to look in the rates. And with that, I will hand it off to Ms. Perrin. So you want to skip down to page, I guess, starting off on page 33.
Yep, page 33. So the sewer and water rates, as he mentioned, we set them to back into the revenues we need to cover the expenditures for the fund for the year. So the Kirk and Brian Masterson put in their requests based on what they're gonna need at their respective plants and the operations of the transmission and distribution. And then we look at what we need for revenues to cover those, as well as funding all the debt payments and money into their reserve accounts. So page 33 is a summary of the orange column is the rates we're proposing to be approved for the next fiscal year. And overall, if you scroll down to the bottom, the yellow highlighted is a typical residential monthly bill, which is based on 5,000 gallons. So a typical household of 4 or 5 people, and it's a 3.2% increase that we're proposing for next fiscal year, or a monthly bill for inside city limits of $140, and then outside city limits of $244.95. The next page, page 34, puts that into a dollar figure for each consumption rate. So 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, and so on and so forth. And then shows you what we were at last year, or the last 2 years, and what we're proposing for next year, and the percent increases per each consumption rate. So somebody who just, a single person household is gonna see about a 3%, 3.05, and then larger businesses all the way down up to 3.25. So it's pretty consistent across the board at 3.2%. Scrolling to the next page, page 35, puts this into the revenue figure. So we take the rates that we have based on the number of bills, the average consumption that we see, which we are projecting a slight decrease over time with more efficient household appliances, toilets, washing machines. Things are all reducing the consumption we're seeing across the board, and those figure into the revenue that we see back in the budget. So we're looking at a total revenue for this fiscal year of about $9.5 million. And then we projected forward a 2% increase in that going forward to do a longer projection. This is a new page that we haven't had before. We calculated it when we were doing the SRF stuff in the fall. So we ran this as a new one and included it for the water and sewer rates for this year. So yeah, if you guys have any questions, let me know. It changes throughout the year based on consumption. So typically when we do our budget reviews throughout the year, we look at to see where we're at consumption-wise and then adjust these multiple times throughout the year. But 3% is what we anticipated it to be in the fall based on the new debt for the projects at the plant. So when running these numbers and getting the actual figures in for what we're gonna have for debt payments, it lined up with what we had brought back to you in the fall.
Yes, are there any questions on the rates? Yeah.
I don't have a question on the rate, but just to clarify, on the projects we approved, all the rates for all the borrowing is already set. The only thing that could change these rates would be if the project costs increases. Is that accurate or no?
Hey, so what was the first part of your question again?
So with the rates for any of the borrowing for the sewer and water projects we approved,
Yeah.
those are already set, correct? Or can those fluctuate?
You're talking about the rates and the bonds, right?
Yeah,
Oh, okay, I got you. I was thinking water rates.
no,
Yeah, so the bond documents have been executed, they're locked in, they're not a variable rate. They're all set. So the only thing, the only thing that could kind of get this off kilter is if something major happens in the operations, or if, I don't even want to say it, because if the project goes significantly over budget, we just probably have to cut that and push it out, right, Dave? Right. Thank you. Yeah. So, yeah, so the DW and the SRF, or the DW SRF and the CW SRF loans that we have, those rates are locked in. So any kind of change in the market or anything that could, it's not gonna change. There's not gonna be a change.
okay, thank you.
I also wanted to point out on the next page, page 36, you can see the two reserve funds, Sewer Capital Reserve with its projected fiscal year-end balance of $1,000,007, and Water Capital Reserve with its projected fiscal year-end balance of $2,030,000. And that is where we would go for any overruns or capital purchases. In fact, at your discretion, we can use this for a shortfall in the operating fund as well. So if we, if we saw an unusual drop in consumption or an unusual increase in costs that are more than we budgeted for, we could draw on this. And contributions to it are budgeted in as well, annual contributions to this fund.
So kind of going back up to, I guess, starting off on page 26, kind of some of the documents you've already seen, kind of highlights the revenues and the expenses and kind of how they mash in together. For the operations across the board, within the water, sewer, lift stations, all those areas, there's not really any major changes proposed in terms of staffing wise. Our primary objective was to maintain the rates to what we told you we would anticipate holding in. So there may be a few adjustments to some maintenance items and stuff like that, but there's really not any major changes across the board in any of the utility funds. Just making sure there's no questions or anything. And I'm not just looking at you because you're the only one, but no, I'm just,
Keep rolling.
do you, I guess, just, keep rolling. Do you want to go line by line through the utility funds? Like I said, for the most part, it's status quo, just like the rest of the budgets. Nothing major, no major increases. Like I said, the biggest thing I think with the utility ones is just the rates and ensuring that we fit within what we said we would with the bonds and the projects going on.
I'm okay if we just highlight the big changes.
Okay. Okay. It's kind of like I said, there's not a lot of major changes within the operation budgets. The salaries are all going to adjust based on the collective bargaining agreements that have been approved. The majority of this area is represented by the steelworkers. There's a couple of admin that also will have some anticipated wage adjustments based on those increases. For the most part, there's some fringe benefits. Those may increase a little bit. Operating wise, there's not too many major increases. Everything's kind of static going across the board. It continues to fund the operations of the water treatment plant, the wastewater treatment plant, the collection and distribution system, as well as the 7 lift stations we have. 9 lift stations. 9 lift stations. We have 7 of something, but I don't remember what it is, but we have 9 lift stations. For the most part, you know, the equipment outside the projects that we are upgrading are in decent shape. The lift stations, we put a lot of time and energy into those, so those are all in good working order right now. There may be some things that come up, but water treatment plant is doing pretty good right now, knock on wood. I know Kirk's gonna roll his eyes when I say that, but water treatment plant's doing pretty good. Again, there's no staffing adjustments in any of these budgets. It's pretty status quo, kind of moving forward from one year to the next year. So, like I said, I think the biggest change in the budgets is just the addition of the debt for the 2 years that we approved for the wastewater treatment plant, the Peck and Eureka area, and then I guess the second phase of the wastewater treatment plant as well, so.
Department 905 is where we handle that debt that Brian referred to, and that's on page 32. And you can see, well, it starts on page 31 with principal. And if you scroll down at the bottom of page 31, there's the Peck and Meridian. But then at the, in the middle of page 32, you can see interest, right in the middle. It's 2025 DWSRF and 2025 CWSRF. Those ones, we've just put in the numbers based on our projections, but those won't even close till August. And they're very conservative. This same page is where you can see transfers out to the reserves at the bottom of the page. And so we've reduced those transfers out. This current year, we have almost 3 million going into sewer and 2.5 million going into water. And we talked about that in November when we were looking at that debt. But we reduced it in the orange column to 700,000 and 600. And then the next year we can increase it a little bit, and that's showing that use to support the new debt and to support, so that keeps those rates around 3. That we're using those reserves a little bit by sending less money to them, if that makes sense.
Any questions? All right. We will move on. All right. Kind of switching gears, getting into our component units, special revenue funds. We have the EDC fund, TIFA 3, the DDA fund, TIFA 1, and TIFA 2, and the LDFA Smart Zone Fund. So, everybody good? Need a bathroom break or anything yet? No? Callie, you good? No? Sure? Okay. Making sure. Hit the panic button if you need something. All right, so getting into, on page 38 here, getting into the EDC budget. Again, no major changes coming across from the EDC. For the most part, things are kind of status quo moving forward. There's the one change in the appropriation, but we'll make that change for the next document that we present to the commission for that. Kind of going across, no major increases in the expenses or in the revenues. Kind of status quo in terms of a budget request. Any questions on the EDC?
What is that appropriation amount again?
35,000.
35, thank you.
TIFA 3 is zeroed out,
TIFA 3 is what?
zeroed out for revenues. Transfer in. Is that
Oh. I'm not sure about that one. You guys,
because our renewal doesn't start till what, 26?
yeah. You guys recall what that one was?
That was a transfer from the TIFA 3 to the EDC. And it's cut in this proposal. It can be added back if you want to add it to the wish list.
I would say that was probably supposed to be there as well, so we'll add that one back in. All right. Any questions on that one? All right, moving into the TIFA 3 fund. That's the TIFA up by the airport. Tax capture proceeds, looking at about 125,000, with the personal property tax loss reimbursement, 93,000. Interest earnings for total budget of about $232,000. Going down to page 41, we started to get into the DDA fund. I guess just as a comment, kind of going into the DDA and kind of coming off the EDC. So the TIFAs, TIFA 1, 2, and 3 are up for expiration. They expire in 2026. There's some work being done to kind of take a look at those and update them. Yeah, so that's being worked on. In terms of the DDA budget, we're anticipating some revenues, about $289,400. There's not a lot of major revenue sources coming in here. We do have an appropriation from the general fund of about $136,900. Without that appropriation, we wouldn't really be able to fund the employee that is designated to the DDA. There's also a contribution, about $35,000, same as the EDC, towards Headwaters for a shared director under that program, so that's plugged in here as well. Revenues coming in at about $289,000. Expenditures are about $289,400. For the most part, things are going static across the board. There's some things that could go up, we don't know. For example, the sidewalk plowing, that's gonna have to be rebid out this spring. there could be a change in that one. But there is a revenue source that comes off of that, and the DDA was kind of looking at possibly doing some different things with that one, so that's gonna be rebid out. We have a list of events that the DDA's kind of focusing on. They narrowed down their events list to try to be a little bit more focused on doing a few events really good instead of kind of overworking everything with a lot of events. Again, no major changes to it. I guess any questions on the DDA fund?
Just for clarity, the EDC board and the DDA board, have they approved the position through Headwaters North?
Yes. Yep. Yeah.
On the PSD special assessment, I think is the current one up next year? And how will that change moving into the future?
I have it on my board. I don't remember if it's, I think it's 2027.
2026 will be the last year, so we have to do a new one.
So we have to do another one, yeah, so we'll have to redo that one too. Yep.
Is there a potential opportunity then to loop the sidewalk snow plowing in with that?
So that's something the DDA board, they discussed it a couple winters ago. At the time, there wasn't, the will to do something like that. So the DDA board is having a conversation. The DDA board serves as the PSD board. And the PSD has the ability to, assess for certain improvements that would benefit the property, just like the city does. And they were considering a possible assessment for those sidewalk cleaning services. So that ensures everybody that benefits is paying for their share of it. We wouldn't have a checkerboard of a couple of people in, a couple of people out, or anything like that. It probably would reduce some costs for some people, but it's just a cleaner way of ensuring that the revenues are coming in to get it. We, as a municipality, don't have that power to do something like that. The PSD specifically has that power through state statute to be able to do that type of special assessment. I think for municipalities to do that, I think it has to be over 100,000 population or something like that. So really the only way to do a special assessment for sidewalk cleaning, the way that we currently do in the DDA, is gonna be through the PSD. So we had a conversation a couple winters ago. At that time, the board wasn't really interested in it. But since then, the board has kind of changed out, and I think they recognize the difficulties not only in managing the program and the checkerboard system that we currently have, but the potential shortfall in the revenues that can come from people not participating, or they say they're gonna participate and then don't pay the bills. It'd just be a lot cleaner and just a lot easier if we could just have a contract with an annual cost, break it out per linear foot for that district. And that includes the city property, because we do have property down there that's part of that linear footage as well. But then just break it out by linear foot, those costs get assessed to the property owners, and then it's taken care of. You don't have to worry about not having enough money, or even on the flip side of that, having too much money, because we bill at the beginning of the season based on the contractual rate. And if we don't have a tough winter, we still keep those revenues. We have it set up in an account that we would apply it to the next winter, but it would just be a lot easier and just a lot cleaner for us.
Next year.
Well, and that's, I mean, it's the timing is kind of coming up because like I said, the snowplow contract is expired, that's gonna be rebid out. And then the conversation with the DDA board, it started a couple months ago to be able to do it on the PSD as a special assessment. That's kinda gotta get moving in order to be prepared for, the winter season, to be able to do this PSD. There's timeframes that we have to follow and all that stuff too, so.
Thank you.
Was that a hit or a wish?
I mean, we're not allowed to make the wish, but, I mean, I guess just in general, I know there was a really tough winter, but there was a lot of talk about the snowbanks and the sidewalks, and it seems like that system is something that could help.
It could, yes. And I mean,
That's, no offense.
Yeah, we can,
Or are
It's a
you,
discussion for another.
yeah,
Oh, you-
Let's
another,
roll
yeah,
forward with
that's
the
fine.
budget.
are you playing me
These
off
are
the
hit or
stage?
misses.
Playing me off the
Let's keep
stage.
rolling.
Take my award and leave, okay. All right, kind of getting to the next couple budgets here. TIFA 1, TIFA 2 kind of shows you the anticipated tax capture coming in next year for both funds, as well as the transfer outs to a couple different line items. Nothing major there. Again, that's something that's got to be renewed here. Coming up, we got to start that process here, so.
Brian, on the TIF 1 and the TIF 2, the debt services, can you tell me when those come off by any chance?
27,
November 2026.
November 2026.
Got a specific date and time?
Not that the champagne is chilling in the fridge. Not
I'm
that the
just gonna
champagne is
say-
chilling in the fridge.
Party on the roof is all I'd say about that.
Kind of going down to the LDFA. LDFA, again, is a tax capture. We renewed that last year. Tax capture, or the budget, the revenues kind of show you where the tax capture is coming in. A lot of the funding does go to Headwaters North to fund the activities around a smart zone. A lot of the consultant or the business development type of activities that they're currently doing is where those funds go. There is some money set aside to help fund the actual building smart zone, quote unquote. But the majority of that is going to the Headwaters North for the administration and development of businesses and partnerships with LSSU and all that fun stuff, so. Any questions on that one? Alrighty, moving into the next set of budgets, going into page 47. We are going to get into our major street, local streets, and stock and equipment. So, just kind of as a reminder, our street system is broken up in different categories, majors and locals. Alleys are kind of thrown in there, some other places, but for the most part, DPW is funded by major street, local streets, and stock and equipment. Major and local streets, a significant portion of their funding comes in through the state, through Act 51. If you followed any of the headlines or any of the articles I've been pushing through to you on Fridays, Act 51 is kind of being, what is that?
Chief.
I went to high school, I was thinking like class was dismissed or something.
I was thinking fire.
Yeah. Can't take them anywhere. All right, as I was saying, Act 51 is kind of being reviewed with a lot of conversations at the state level regarding the funding for roads and fixing the damn potholes and all that stuff. This is kind of a carry forward from the program that's currently there. There could be some changes. I know with the state budget, I'm not sure if we incorporated, but the state budget is anticipating trying to throw some more funding into the roads. But I don't think we really accounted for that yet because nothing's kind of concrete, right?
It is not included in the budget,
Yeah.
but it was sizable. We did get a calculation, but we don't include anything if it hasn't actually been passed.
Yeah, I think right now it's passed the House. It hasn't even gone to the Senate yet, and it's got to go through the state budget process. So there's a lot of conversation going on about it. So these could change. I wouldn't anticipate them going down. I would mostly anticipate them going up based on kind of what's going on in the state. So kind of getting into Fund 202 major streets, you kind of see the revenues broken out there again. Major sources of it come through the various State Act 51 line items. Just kind of going on snow plowing there. So at line item 202,000,546 is the snow subsidy. And that's what we get for being a winter community. And that's actually based on the averages of the winters over the last 3 or 5 years, something of that nature. So if we have a bad winter, it can actually impact us negatively in terms of revenues because it's an average. So revenues coming in to the major street department is coming in estimated about 1.9 million.
Are you defining bad winter as no snow or a lot of snow?
Touche. From a financial standpoint, a bad winter is no snow. And I guess even on that side, if it's a bad winter and it's too much snow, then we lose financial too. But for this purposes, it's no snow. So major streets and local streets, just kind of touching base on some of the salaries. Salaries are increasing again by the CBAs and the rates in which were approved. We do have, each staff member has the opportunity to kind of budget or cost out to different line items. So it's hard to say how many people are actually that $297,000, because at one point, somebody can work on majors, they can work on locals, and they get kind of shifted that way. So staff-wise, for the most part, we're continuing at our staffing levels within the DPW. Kind of going down the budgets, there's not a lot of major changes anticipated in here. A lot of expenses, some contracted services. Yeah, nothing major in terms of any significant changes or anything of that nature, so. Our major street fund does have looks like a decent fund balance kind of being built up a little bit, but we won't tell Dave that. Are there any questions on the major street fund?
That balance wouldn't even pave Meridian.
Wouldn't even pave Meridian. Or Lake Shore.
Yeah.
Local streets, you'll see a different fund.
Yeah. All right, so going down to local streets, again, majors are your major streets, so your thoroughfares are the ones that most people drive on. Local streets are kind of the side streets a little bit. Again, there's funding that comes in from the state through the Act 51 program. Budget's coming in, or revenue's coming in about $897,000. Yeah, going down to kind of Kristen's comment in here, the fund balance for this one's not as strong as the other one, but I would say probably majority of our work are on local streets as well too, so. Again, no major changes, staffing levels remain the same, costs for salaries increase based on CBAs. Not a whole lot of major changes in here, just continuing to provide the services that we've historically provided. No major changes there, so. Anything on major streets, local streets, anything like that? No? Stock and equipment. Stock and equipment. Kind of fair to say it's our catch-all for DPW. Stock and equipment is our catch-all for DPW. So there's a series of revenues that do come into stock and equipment. We've got some tire grants that we typically do. Charges for services is a bigger one, and those are internal charges for services, correct? So like if the, yeah, so any work done for the other departments is charged out to that department, and then it gets paid to stock and equipment, so. Equipment rental, stock and equipment is also the primary budget that purchases all of our equipment. Those get rented out to the users within the other budgets. That kind of comes back in that way. And then you see some other transfers that come in kind of based on capital needs, kind of moving forward. Salaries and wages, again, any increase to that is just based on the CBAs. For the most part, it's all static, moving across the board. No major increases anticipated for anything, supplies, gas, uniforms, anything of that nature.
Up in revenue and stock and equipment, you can see the transfers in, and that's where we funded the fire truck. But you can also see the loan up there. So in right in the middle, it says bond or loan proceeds. We have 400,000 right there, but it changed last night. So now it's at 500,000, because we were anticipating borrowing for a grader. I believe, yeah, grader. We changed that to 500,000 to borrow for the fire truck that you discussed. And then the transfer in from the general fund remain the same in year one, but in year two, it drops down to 270,000. So that did help the general fund a little bit. And then, if you look further down in the expenditures, it's it's on the next page, 52, and it's under equipment, Department 902, so 661902 equipment. You can see it went up to 1,475,000 in this report that you see, but we've increased it to 1,975,000. And then in year two, right here, it shows 300,000. That was the second part of the fire truck that we had budgeted, but that's now zero in the new approved after last night's action. So this fund shifted around quite a bit because of it.
1,975,000 or 475?
1,975,000 is the new number for the orange column there under equipment, because we needed an extra 500,000,
Okay.
okay?
So you're doing a wish or whatever to adjust those, or
Yep.
however you do it?
I got it on there for you. But since you took action last night, that's kind of just a clerical item.
Any questions? All right, we'll keep it rolling. We're nearing the end here. Moving into the parking funds, enterprise funds, 514 parking. This is the on-street parking that we have out there. Revenues estimated to be about $251,000 based on historical dollar amounts being brought in. For the most part, again, the expenses are pretty same going across the board. No major increases or anything of that nature. So everything is pretty status quo on that one. Any questions on that one?
So on that parking fund, we have an excess, it looks like of 29.7. Did we, as Marion had said last night, have we ever talked about one of those, solar, standalone,
The kiosks?
kiosks?
So at one point, we started looking into those things. The kiosks, there's a couple different types of kiosks. There's one that you have to hardwire in to ensure power and all that stuff. We did look at a solar module, and I believe that's what Marquette has, but there's some issues with it being in a winter community because the snow covers up the solar panel. The battery may not last that long in the cold weather. So we did look at those. They were expensive, and really to make them worthwhile, you have to spread them out. You have to buy enough to really spread them out about every 200 feet. Because if you park down here and the other one's on the other side of the block or the parking lot, chances are people aren't going to walk there. So you have to strategically kind of place them around. The cost got high, and we just didn't think that was a really viable option at that time. So
Is there even anything as simple as having envelopes there that they can pay and drop? I mean, there are a lot of different alternatives. Anyways, discussion for another meeting. But, I mean, I think there's a way to accommodate people that don't have the passport. And
yeah, yeah. I mean, we've talked about looking at some
maybe
different.
gain more revenue, yeah.
Yeah, we talked about looking at some different options too, but
Okay.
just for the time being, we just haven't gotten to them yet, but it's something we'll continue to look into. Yeah, so,
Not a wish, but a longer term wish.
all right, parking deck, going into the next budget, revenue is estimated to be about 454,000. The operations there are status quo, no major changes there. No major changes there. As we mentioned earlier, the debt for this particular item has fallen off in a year, year and a half, 2 years. But for the most part, it's kind of status quo going across the board, so. No major changes there. Other than that, we can move into internal service funds, information systems, proprietary funds, internal service funds. These are kind of the smaller but important kind of funds that we have. First one being 636. This is our internal IT fund. The charges for services comes out for the charges to the different departments throughout the organization based on a shared usage of the IT, based kind of on a formula. It's a standalone fund, so those revenues come in to fund the IT director and the equipment that we need, the websites, the softwares, all the good things that kind of make our operations run. Included in it are also communications, some dues and subscriptions, equipment. We had the GIS person in this one at one point, but we took them out and put them in a different budget. So I guess it doesn't reflect on this one because it was probably a few more years before that. But this is the standalone IT budget. Capital-wise, we didn't have a whole lot of capital kind of planned out for this one. I think there's some laptops being replaced and some other things. So for the most part, status quo going across the board. And then we're anticipating a retirement within that fund as well this year, so. Any questions on the IT?
I actually have a question going back to parking.
Yeah.
Once all those 24-hour stickers are off, do you see that, I'm serious, changing the revenue number coming in much, or?
No, not much, no. I wouldn't anticipate that. No. All right, employee health insurance. Moving down to the next one, employee health insurance. This is our self-funded health insurance program. We have the contributions coming in from the employees and then the employer contribution to fund the rest of them. Again, this funds our health insurance program, so you can see down the line items in there, HRA claims, prescription drug claims. We work with a consultant to kind of manage this and some of our costs. We usually meet with them late summer, early fall. Mannequin Vance, right, that's them. Yeah, we meet with Mannequin Vance, and they look for opportunities for us to either change our program to save some money, maybe offer an extended benefit. We get into the type of prescription drugs our beneficiaries are utilizing. I don't know. The prescription drugs that our employees and their families are getting. We look for different options to do that, so we try to maintain the cost there. We're not anticipating a whole lot of increase in the expenses for the health insurance plan. I think we've been pretty fortunate year after year. The increases have been kind of minimal compared to other organizations, and even what I've seen in other places that I've worked for, they were looking at 20, 30% year over year. And I think we're still at least staying in the single digits.
Yeah, and that's reflective of the employee base and containing their cost.
Yeah. So, any questions on the employee health insurance program?
What's the difference between 610 and 611 down there? in the
One.
appropriations? Well, different classification of employee or?
611 are retirees, and 610 are actives.
Oh, gotcha, I see that down there, okay.
And in the top there, the retirees, they still make a contribution to the
Prescription drug, okay, gotcha. Yeah.
program as well.
I was seeing double. It's getting to that time.
Yes. What happens with line items? All right, so that's the employee health insurance fund. We'll kind of roll over to the trusts and some other funds. And for the trust funds, I'm going to turn it over to Kristen, and she can kind of take you guys through these because she knows them a little bit better than I do.
So we start in the SEAL operating fund, and that is where the SEAL trust moves the applicable money from the trust to be spent by you all and the interested parties. So SEAL is, remember, that's recreational, and we have a revenue of basically the most of it's the transfer in from the SEAL trust. Then we have a transfer out to the general fund, and that's to fund the ball field improvements. And with the depletion of that fund, I'm looking in the orange column of 25,000. It still has an ending fund balance of 357,000. Move on to Fund 106, which is the
Can I
Osborne.
ask a question? I'm sorry. to
Oh, yeah,
interrupt.
please.
Within the transfer out, is there anything, and I know typically it is going to capital project, but through the general fund, I know typically in the past that transfer out has gone to capital projects, but is there anything in the fund agreement that says it can't go to the general fund?
It could not, it depends on the purpose. It's going to the general fund to purchase the fencing
Okay.
and the bleachers. So it is a project and an improvement at the park.
Okay,
We cannot transfer it for everyday maintenance
gotcha.
based on the trust document.
Thank you.
Anything else on the seal? Okay, Osborne Operating is the historic. And again, this Fund 106 is where the commission has authorization to spend the money. The biggest transfer in, the biggest revenue source is the transfer in from the trust, and that's a percentage of the net earnings of the trust at 46,008. Then we have 53,000 being spent, transferred out to capital projects, and that's for improvements at the historic homes, with a net revenue shortfall of $6,000, leaving 6,300 in the fund. So I'll move on, if there are no questions on the historic operating, to Fund 151, which is perpetual care. And that is a trust, so that funds in there is interest earnings and market earnings on holdings. And that fund has an ending fund balance of 362,000. So that can be used for improvements at the cemetery.
Can I just ask, many municipalities have moved their perpetual care funds into trust agreements with community foundations. Is there any talk of that? Has that been considered at all?
I think it's a great thing to consider, but I've not heard the talk about it.
Thank you.
In fact, we have talked about having an investment advisor take over that and try to make it a portfolio that has, diversification. So there's talk
It
of
wasn't
that.
necessarily just perpetual care either.
Right.
It was all of our trust funds. We were trying to pool them together. Yeah, that's what we talked about.
Something to consider for the future. Fund 155, the Seal Trust. This shows where the money was made, and the interest earnings are budgeted at 75,000, and then the transfer out is going to that fund we looked at earlier, Fund 105.
Do you know offhand what the rate of return is on that? It's
4.5 right now.
4.5%.
Yeah, I think about 4.5, roughly. I could follow up with an exact rate if you want. On Fund 156 is the trust for Osborne, so that's the historic one. They had a little less. They earned 55,000, and they transferred out 46,008, and they have around $1 million, $1,030,000. Seal has $1,440,000.
Hey, Kristen, back on the cemetery, what is the Burt Estates interest earnings? Is that just a check that comes to us, or do we have
The Burt
funds that we manage?
The Burt Estate gifted us stocks. So we have a small holding of stocks, and that's what that balance is, that's what that earning is from. I'm not really, not real in favor of an undiversified portfolio. That's why we were talking about maybe having that, taking a look at that from a professional. But it's restricted, so we have to check with legal on that.
Is there a trust document or something that governs the use of that?
All I have is something I was given, which was like from the 80s. And so I'll give that to you all.
None. Just curious.
After page 67, if there are no questions on the trusts, we have Fund 243, which is the brownfield. And that just has a little bit of interest earnings and environmental assessment expenses and a fund balance of 116,002. The next fund on page 69 is the Special Revenue Fund. And most of the activity in here has to do with the police, the crime proceeds, and the drug forfeiture. Now we have opioid settlement revenue coming in there, and there's some money to spend on a good cause that would be compliant. All those have to be compliant with restrictions for how they're spent. We have a little bit of land sale revenue, and this was where we had the ARPA money, and thankfully we spent that this current fiscal year, the rest of it. So that fund has an ending fund balance of 440, and it's our little nest egg for, we did utilize some money for equipment purchased in the stock and equipment. That was 2 purchases. I believe it was a sander, and there was one other small thing that we purchased, an underbed something, scraper. So that 39,000 is going to stock and equipment for those smaller purchases from land sales, if you approve this budget. The next page is,
On that one, opioid settlement revenue is mixed in with the entire fund balance. Do you know what the balance is just for the opioid settlement?
I can get back to you, but it just started, that 90,000, I think, was mostly the first year,
First one.
wasn't it?
Correct.
There might have been a little bit more.
Correct.
So it's 90 plus 90, there's 180, plus another, it looks like about 110, so, yeah, 400,000? No, 300,000. If we look through the end of the
250.
second year budget,
Okay, 300, yeah.
is my math correct?
Okay.
Okay.
I must have lost track of it in my head. That's
It's
a
a
lot more
lot
than
of-
I thought.
It's a lot of money. We have a designated
It's 2 years, though.
use of it, so.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, 300 grand in
Yeah,
3 years.
I think I had this year's in my head more than anything. But yeah, and those, I guess just to comment on those, just to reiterate too, those are, some of those funds were one-time funds, the contracts that they worked out, if the manufacturer, distributor, whoever had to pay, if they paid up front, they got a discount on it. But a lot of them are still in a 25 to 30-year payback. So it's gonna be, we're gonna have this influx of cash that has to be used for these specific services. It's gonna be kinda higher, but moving forward, you know, I think there was one document I forwarded that kind of tried to put an estimate to it, because a lot of people were kind of trying to figure out how to use these funds moving forward, but it's gonna be, compared to what we've gotten up front, it's gonna be kind of a trickle coming in over the next 20, 25 years, so.
This budget is based on what you sent me, and it was a couple months ago, probably,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, yeah, it'll peter out, but there's quite a bit of money there and putting it to a good cause. The next fund, starting on page 70, is the Gaming Compact. So that's money from the 2% money from the Sioux Tribe. And that 340,000 includes 40,000 that we pass right through to the River of History Museum based on an agreement that's like a 40-year agreement. And then the ending fund balance is 29.1, because we used that 300,000 to buy the fire truck. Any questions on those? So the next fund, starting on page 72, is the Debt Service Fund. And this fund just brings money in from the source funds and pays it out on the debt that is not enterprise funds. So this is governmental debt. So it's usually related to roads. This building is in here as well. 373,000 coming in, 460,000 going out, because we transferred 90,000 out to stock and equipment. And that's because there was a little fund balance buildup in this fund that just wasn't needed. We've had a lot of debt drop off. And so we use that to purchase I don't remember, a couple of things. 45,000 each, I believe, if I remember. Maybe it was, yeah. And then we have, the next fund is 732, that's the police fire pension. We have employer contribution based on the actuarial of 2,000,001. The total estimated revenues are 3 million and change. We have expenses for the fund, the main one being the top line is pension benefits, 2.5 million. We have total appropriations of 3.8 million, including change in market value. And then that's just based on average. We have a net appropriation of negative 813 and closing with a fund balance of 24,000,006. We've had a lot of volatility in recent months on this fund. Last time I looked, we were just below 24 million. But it's in good hands with our investment advisor, so I think we'll be fine. Any questions on the pension fund? The last fund is Fund 736, and I love this fund because the budget is zero. This is the PEHP you hear about, and this is the transition that we're in process of finishing up to transition all the trust held by the city for retiree health care into MERS managed individual accounts. So this one will be paid out this year. We're just finishing up the legal work, and then we have a little meeting. You've already approved it, and this fund will pay out and be closed.
So that is your fiscal year 25-26 proposed operating budget. Hold your applause, Jody. Thanks. So a couple of things will change, but there wasn't any really major hit or wishes or anything like that. So we can kind of not do our budget reconciliation meeting next Monday. We'll just make the adjustments that we talked about. We'll bring it to you at the next commission meeting for first reading and then consideration after that, correct?
If you do it that way, you might want to just vote on the changes at that meeting, just to make sure that we get everything documented, and we'll have this document with the hit and wish.
Right,
So
so we
that
can
would
do
work.
that. We can do it at the next meeting, so. No need for Monday, but you're still more than welcome to show up next Monday if you want to. Jody will be here. But
I'll sit right here.
other than that, again, I just want to reiterate, big thank you to the staff for sitting through this, but also for the time and effort putting into their operating budgets, their requests. And again, big thank you to Kristen and Robin and Callie for doing most of the legwork and keeping the process going. And then a big thank you to Kristen, as this will be her last budget. So, if that's all, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn. Can I do that?
No.
No.
Nice try, though. All right, does anybody have any questions, comments? Great job, everybody, thank you. We'll talk about it at our Monday meeting, so. Are there any matters presented by the public? Matters presented by the city commission? Closing the meeting, who would like to make the motion to adjourn? Commissioner Bosbus-Rath.
Your Honor, I motion that we close this meeting.
Support.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.